How beautiful are metallic watercolors? Let's find out in this video. I've combined metallic watercolors, heat embossing, and mixed media ink to create this vintagey holiday card. Once my image is stamped and heat embossed in white embossing powder, we're ready to watercolor. I begin by misting the image and the watercolor pan with clean water. I'm using the wet on wet technique, which is wet watercolor on wet paper. This allows the watercolor paint to spread and blend. I concentrate the color at the base of the petal, dabbing the brush off to remove color and lightening the color while working towards the top of the petal. I started with a small brush but switched to an Altenew watercolor brush. I don't fill the barrel with water. I prefer to dip it in water as I find that easier to control the amount of water I use. So I continue adding the garnet, which is the darker color, to the base of the petals, working my way around the flower. And then I bring in the gold pearl, placing it at the top of the petals and pulling it into the garnet color. Now I'm going to color the second bloom in the exact same way. Now I forgot to mention earlier, I am using Altenew watercolor paper. This is a cold pressed paper, which means it can absorb a lot of water and dries quickly. So I continue painting the flower, concentrating the garnet color, the darker color at the base, and then bringing in the gold pearl at the top of the petals and drawing it into that garnet color. Now I'm adding a wash of clean water over the leaf, and then I'm going to bring in the jade metallic watercolor and draw that color outwards towards the edges of the leaves as well, and then come back in with the gold pearl metallic watercolor and continue working those colors in together. So why did I heat emboss the image? Well, heat embossing the image means it stays nice and crisp when I'm watercoloring, because those embossed lines act as a barrier to my wet medium. So it's not going to go outside of those lines unless I intentionally paint it outside of those lines. So this way I can still keep my image nice and sharp and crisp. I don't lose the detail, but I can blend my watercolor within those areas super easy. So I'm going to continue on coloring these leaves, and I'll just put on a little music until I get to the end of coloring this image. So we are just finishing up the leaves here, and I'm going to set that aside, let it dry, and move on to the card front. So I start by inking this card front with some evergreen mixed media ink. I dry that with a heat tool, and then I'm going to come in and ink over top with grapevine mixed media ink and a blending tool. Once that's dried with the heat tool, I sprinkle some rose gold crisp embossing powder. And now you can see I'm heating this from the back side because I don't have any clear embossing ink for that powder to stick to. I don't want to blow it away. So once it melts, I can bring, or starts to melt I should say, I can bring my heat tool to the front and melt that completely. And now I've die cut that bloom with the coordinating die, and I'm attaching it to the card front with some instant dimension foam tape. Now I was quite generous with that tape so that this will easily make it through the mail if I decide to mail it in the future. So I have hot foiled the sentiment with the holiday greetings hot foil plate and die cut that with a corresponding die, and now I'm keeping the dimension to a minimum and just gluing it over top of the die cut, or pardon me, the watercolor die cut. And so once I've glued that down, I've just trimmed off the edge of that bloom or leaf that was kind of hanging off the edge of the card, and I'm gluing that to an A2 card front, and my card is completed. So there you have this vintagey metallic watercolor card. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I hope you'll subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.